yeah, that's a great question. Hopefully everybody heard that. When chemical algicides are applied to algae, especially blue-green, gotta keep in mind these critters were the first things on the planet. They've been around the longest. They've had the longest time to adapt. They have adapted to many different habitats. Hot springs, acid environments, alkaline environments, you name it. No oxygen, too much oxygen, etc. So they are very well adapted. And when they sense a stressor, and that could be anything, it could be temperature, it could be anything, chemicals, algicide, copper, they sense a stressor, and what they do is they have what they call programmed cell death. So they'll sit there and they'll destroy their existing colony, but they'll leave some spores left over to double the colony growth rate the second time. So what keeps happening with some of these lakes that are treating with copper sulfate all the time, especially lakes that are using it for filamentous green algae, which was that scuzzy stuff that we saw that doesn't look kind of blue-green. You start treating that a lot with copper, and if it is a hypereutrophic system, it will eventually shift to blue-green algae, and that's bad because that produces toxins. So they're very smart for being very dumb-looking. They're very smart critters, it's deceptive because when you first apply a copper product to blue-green algae, they disappear, and you think the problem's gone, but then it comes back even stronger because the program's all done.
And then, I'm sorry, if I may, you talked about bioaccumulation. I think that's an important concept as well.
Right, so the last thing we want to do is start accumulating the copper. And this is scary. So Houghton Lake started treating fish with copper sulfate back in the 1950s and 60s. And they've been actually charting the concentration of copper sulfate in the sediment. We actually just took new samples a couple weeks ago, and those numbers have gone up even more. So copper is something that doesn't break down very easily. It stays in the sediment, it biopersists, and there aren't a lot of macroinvertebrates that like that. And we're, like that one table, we're trying to shift that from the bad midge and the zebra mussels to better quality. We want, stoneflies and caddisflies and mayflies and other types of snails and bivalves in the lake, which we don't see very much of.
Isn't copper heavy metal or no? Is it one of
Yes, as a matter of fact, when the lab analyzes it, they consider it an actual metal, so they have to run the copper and the sulfate separately.
So on the notion of bioaccumulation is if we have critters that eat it, more critters eat it up the food chain, it's
Bioaccumulating.
It's accumulating in the tissue of the fish as it goes up the food chain, and then they die and rot, and we just keep throwing this heavy metal through the system.
Yeah, mercury and PCBs I know have been, a TMDL issue in the lake fish tissue.